guns. With over a decade serving Central and Southwest Virginia, we make the complex easy. Our team experience can help with firearm transfers and 100% electronic process for silencer ownership that is done in-house. And when you know firearms, you know it's honest. That's why we offer accurate appraisals and low prices. Looking to buy, sell, or trade?
You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app, 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane.
And there's a local tie to this development, no less. The story that broke around lunchtime earlier today, as we welcome you into the Fast Lane right here on the VTRN Sports app. Ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube. UVA announcing that Chris Pollard, former Duke head baseball coach, former as of last night, he was their baseball coach. He will now be the new baseball coach at the University of Virginia. Can we pause for just a brief second? This is not a complete rinse, wash, repeat from what happened with Brian O'Connor when he was just kind of loitering around the Charlottesville airport, reportedly, before getting on a plane the moment Mississippi State's season ended, and then getting down to Starkville to be the new head coach of Mississippi State. Not quite on that level, but Virginia plucking Chris Pollard. Is there one situation, and look, you will find many people, some of whom have more credibility than we do. Some of them have even appeared in the Fast Lane, like David Teal, Hall of Fame reporter for dailypress.com. Among the others, Jerry Ratcliffe, who's been with us each of the last 2 weeks. And of course, you can check him out, Fast Lane Ed Lane, wherever you listen to podcasts or VTRN Sports, Facebook Live and YouTube, because...
And guess what? We keep receipts.
Right there. But all of us have been critical of Carla Williams for lack of communication with the fans directly or with the fans through the media. Either route you want to go to criticize her, I think is completely fair game. But I will at least give her this level of credit. The hire of Chris Pollard as Virginia baseball coach may not work out. It'd be awesome if it did. Amherst County native, Chris Pollard from Duke to UVA, closer to home. It would be awesome. And the guy that many people thought would be at the front of the list if/when Brian O'Connor left. But the thought process at least makes a level of sense between that and Ryan Odom as Virginia men's basketball coach. Again, the coach that most people thought all along made the most sense for UVA men's basketball when Tony Bennett abruptly retired at the end of October 2024. For all of the warts of Carla Williams, and a lot of it's justified, I'll at least grant her this. The last two big hires she's had to make have been well thought out.
How do you feel about it? That's your main thing. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about the hire situation that UVA pulled?
Like for this one in particular, or like the last two?
Right, for this one in particular. Like, they just hired a coach after Duke lost that night.
So, I'll say this. You hate that that's the part of the business. I tend to think oftentimes, and Dan Hurley was on 60 Minutes a couple of months ago and had a fascinating soundbite that he shared. And this is where we're live on the air, getting distracted, looking at the screen at Fastlane Ed Lane on VTRN Sports and Facebook Live. But Dan Hurley was on 60 Minutes and had a really compelling part. And he said this about players transferring out of a program.
50% of my roster or more. 50% of my roster or more is at least, considering going in the portal. If not, already knows what school that they're going to.
50% of the players have an idea of what's next. And then he backed it up.
Yeah, and in a couple of those cases, they've already talked to the coaching staff at future school and have an idea of what their NIL is going to be there.
The money.
Yeah.
That was Dan Hurley on 60 Minutes a couple of months ago. And Dan Hurley brought up the point with those sound bites of players often knowing where they're going to go. Look, clearly Chris Pollard knew where he was going to go before the Duke baseball season had officially concluded. I mean, unless you believe, Ty, maybe you're in the minority, that this deal just magically came together. Chris Pollard was so dejected from Duke's loss to Murray State yesterday that he could not sleep last night, and therefore he and his agent magically worked out every single detail of what he would need, went back to Duke with their best offer, and made the decision to go to UVA all in the span of like 15 hours. Which one do you believe? That they made that decision in 15 hours through all those processes, or that he had an idea, Chris Pollard, that he was going to leave Duke for Virginia?
Well, I'll say this. He probably knew, like, well, I'm getting out of here. And he saw the opportunity at the UVA, so he took that job immediately and left. So that's my biggest thing, because I know how that be, with, especially college, on the college athletics.
So I agree with you on that. And I don't fault coaches for doing it. They've done this for a long time. Biggest example, another one locally in our backyard, Torian Gray was at Virginia Tech, was a defensive backs coach. The day after National Signing Day, this was back before players could easily get out of their national letter of intents and transfer. And this is part of the reason why I'm okay with player empowerment, because you weren't going to let them do this, but you'll let coaches do it. The next day, he leaves for Florida. Oh, so he just magically got offered Florida. They were so impressed with the closing job of Torian Gray at Virginia Tech that they offered to exponentially increase his salary. Like, it's amazing how they used that data and zeroed in on him with thousands of candidates that were out there. I mean, I'm impressed. Can you tell there's sarcasm dripping from my voice? Like, this is the case. So process-wise, on that level, it stinks. Now, from Virginia, they kept it under wraps. Most people had an idea this was going to happen, but it never really got out that Chris Pollard was going to be the case. Again, for the record, I have no problem with Chris Pollard leaving. I agree. This is why you have representation. Remember when Hugh Freeze left Liberty and the infamous overtones about how he had not accepted anything at Auburn? He had not been, ready to make the offer official. Well, you can tell your agent what they want. And when you have Jimmy Sexton and your Hugh Freeze and Jimmy Sexton is your agent, you can say, this is what I would need. And then when all of a sudden they give it to me, you authorize Jimmy Sexton to say, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go take this offer. And then voila, when you end up getting put in the tough spot, you can just be, just wait it out and see where this thing ends up going. So, we have seen this happen so many times in sports that I am beyond, maybe I'm just overly cynical with this. And again, I don't fault coaches or players, but this is kind of just the nature of the beast to me.
I'll say you could tell from some coaches that are like, okay, he's planning on leaving soon, or he's leaving right after the season. You could tell from some coaches, especially you could tell from the atmospheres or everything. So you can look on the sideline, you knew like, okay, some is fishy. He might be leaving. It's coming soon, or it might be a surprise shocker. Like, okay, he's out there like after the last game of the season or so. So that's like you could tell from some coaches that they are leaving and everything.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can, and you get an idea of how this is going to work. And I mean, we can look at all sorts of coaching changes, but the Virginia one of them is this. I think ultimately this is the right process to go about the coach. Like, if you're looking for proven Power 5 experience, you've seen Duke up close in person in the ACC. And Chris Pollard has not gotten them to a College World Series and 4 super regional appearances. But he's gotten them to the super regionals 4 times. You'd have to presume Virginia is a better job with more resources devoted to baseball than Duke has had devoted to baseball. As reactionary as Carla Williams seemed to be about Brian O'Connor and never being proactive about getting him what he wanted, but instead always seemingly reactive. That's an area that's got to get corrected, or you're going to encounter the same problem with Chris Pollard, or maybe it would be Lars Tiffany, or maybe it would be, please forgive me if I don't get the names correct or even know who they are, but the coaches of other prominent sports like men's tennis, Andres Pedroso, squash, sorry, don't know that one. Swimming and diving, again, sorry, don't know that one, as I get my confessions on. These are my confessions. Here in the fast lane. But if you're looking at the outlined opportunities for who Virginia could have hired as their next baseball coach, there are really 3 that came to mind. Chris Pollard was the one that seemed to be the favorite. The other 2 that just jumped off to me, this is novice fan that's out there, is Kevin Schnall. You may not know who he is, but he's that baseball coach at Coastal Carolina. Got them to the Super Regionals this year, which you can hear, by the way, in the College World Series, which you can hear beginning this Friday, 1:40 airtime right here on the VTR and Sports app. It'll take us off this Friday, as well as at least next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But you can hear Coastal Carolina and other teams. But here's the thing. Kevin Schnall just took over a year ago, last June, for Gary Gilmore, who had a great 29-year run. how much can you really base what Coastal's done this year just on Schnall, and how much is based upon the foundation of a really strong program that he inherited? Sorry, Liberty. I know you hate Coastal, but I got to call a spade a spade. Coastal's had better baseball success, is evidenced by 2 trips now to the College World Series and 1 championship in the last decade, whereas the Liberty Flames are still looking to get to that point, and they sputter down the stretch this year. So let's call a spade a spade. But, Kevin Schnall's not the guy I'm sitting there if I'm Virginia going, I'd be intrigued. I'd kick the tires on him, but he's a fallback option. And the other one that's out there, and again, please forgive me for not knowing the name of this one.
Forgiveness is more than saying sorry.
But it's ironically Dan Skirka. I clearly don't even know a lot about him other than that, he's been there 7 years for Murray State as their baseball coach, but he got them to the College World Series this year. One of the most improbable runs. They were, I'm not joking here, 800 to 1 odds to win the College World Series at the beginning of the tournament. Not 80 to 1, 800 to 1 odds. Murray State. They're now 40 to 1. Still long, but a lot better than they were because there's only 8 teams that are left in the College World Series picture, 4 on each side of the bracket. But I get it. 7th year at Murray State, but this is a breakthrough moment. If you're Virginia, though, you're talking about 2 coaches you would have targeted if Pollard doesn't come through. Pollard's operated in the ACC. He's had to compete with those type of programs that are on this level. And again, I don't pretend to be the aficionado when it comes to baseball of Trey Lyle from the Foul Ball Area podcast. I'm sure y'all will have more tomorrow in the morning warm-up, 7, 8 a.m. Ty. You and Trey will probably have more on this. And I don't pretend to know as much as Preston Willett of Cavs Corner, of thesaber.com. Got to get one for the virtual swear jar. We love Cavs Corner as well. But Preston Willett of thesaber.com around 5:30 today in the Fast Lane, as we'll chat with him about this hire. And he's been all over it with the podcast that they have dropped over the last month or so. But I like the thought process for Virginia. And as somebody who's criticized Carla Williams, there have been so many times that's been the case. It is at least worth bringing up the one positive, which is she's found a way to get the hire right when it comes to Virginia baseball. Meanwhile, we like to get it right regularly here in the Fast Lane. But when you're talking about court cases, battling the insurance company, what happens if you're in an auto accident? You don't hope to get it right. Let me rephrase that. You don't hope to get it right. We don't want to curse. Or at least if we do, we want to beep it out. You must get it right. If you hope to get it right, you call any old lawyer. If you must get it right, which you should, you call Trost Law, because they've been serving our community and Virginia's drivers for over 4 decades, since 1982. 777-HURT, TrostLaw.com are the places you can go to keep up with Trost Law and learn more. But it's real easy. 777-HURT or TrostLaw.com. If you've been in an accident, when you're in one, you can't hope. You don't need to go to the backup option for legal consultation. You need to hit the home run with your first choice, like Virginia baseball did with their hire of Chris Pollard, Amherst County native. You need to hit the home run with the right legal representation if you're in an auto accident, and that's why you need TrostLaw.com. Now, other topics, including, I wouldn't say pour one out for Trey. If anything, I would say go Trey. He'll be excited to hear this update in the Fast 5 at 5-ish.
It's time for Fast 5 at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
Trey's guy, Dan Orlovsky. Danny-O, backup quarterback mediocrity as much as he was. Trey loves him as an analyst, and Trey will be, that cheer you heard yesterday was the guest you'll have tomorrow, Bryson Gordon of newsadvance.com, when the Red Sox call up their top prospect, Roman Anthony. The groan you heard Sunday late afternoon was Ty Gibbs getting frustrated about strategy. We're going to kick that conversation to tomorrow in the Fast Lane about how to handle defeat when things don't go your way, because we've got 2 great guests today, including more on Ty Gibbs, by the way, at 5:45 with Motor Racing Network lead announcer, Alex Hayden. But Dan Orlovsky will re-sign with ESPN. So the cheer you've heard this afternoon just recently is Trey being excited because he will continue to appear on ESPN programming like NFL Live and the second team of Monday Night Football, which Trey may be watching All of you that are smart listeners out there, you'll just be listening on the VTRN Sports app, your home for the best play-by-play from the Stanley Cup playoffs. Last night's game disappointed, to the College World Series begins this Friday, to plenty of college football, basketball, and NFL action as the seasons get ready in the next couple months. You'll be listening to that. But Trey can rest assured that on those rare nights when there are 2 Monday Night Football games, he'll be able to enjoy his guy Danny O for at least the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, speaking of television audiences,
Number 4.
NBA Finals. Game 2 audience dropped 29% at just 8.76 million viewers. I will repeat what I've said a lot, which is a lot of this is coming back to roost if people are not tuning in. And it's down 29% compared to the Celtics Mavericks last year. When you are a network that is so fixated on the stars and the big market teams, that after Indianapolis justifiably throttled New York in Game 6, you're not talking about how great Indianapolis is and whether they could challenge Oklahoma City, which is an extremely well-assembled roster, as we saw Sunday night for Game 2. You're talking about what went wrong with the Knicks. And all the talk is on the big market teams and the biggest name stars. Well, then don't be shocked when the audience doesn't tune in because you're not doing a very good job of promoting your product, which is a real problem when it comes to the finals. I think the action is exciting and great. But when I'm looking at it from an ESPN viewership standpoint, absolutely, it is reasonable and fair game to criticize them because of what they have done or not done to promote this. Meanwhile, I will give them credit in
Number 3.
because a lot of credit has gone to Texas Tech and Najee Kennedy, the $1 million arm for Texas Tech. Dr. Dot Richardson, we love her to death, but she was a little bit off last week. She predicted Texas Tech would win the Women's College World Series, but as she probably heard on the VTRN Sports app for games 1, 2, and 3, Texas Tech lost game 1 and then was blown out 12-4 in game 3. They did get the win in game 2, but Texas Tech did not win. However, on TV, it drew 2.4 million viewers. First of all, softball really is exciting. If you're talking about the way a sport is set up for springtime excitement, I love the 7 innings versus 9 innings. Baseball games. Here's an idea about baseball. This coming Friday, as well as next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we will be carrying the College World Series, and it will preempt our show. The games start at 2 p.m. But in your right mind, do you believe these games are going to go shorter than 3.5 hours? You add into that a post-game show, you're sitting there going, this is going to last way too long. Look, I admire how disciplined you have to be to play baseball. I will consume the College World Series and college baseball as we head to the stretch run, and even the Major League playoffs. But the games last an eternity. Softball is bang, bang, bang. It's 7 innings. It's intense action. It's a real fast-paced sport to go with the fast-pitch softball part to this. But women's sports has been on the rise. And I know there's a sector of crotchety old media members out there that just detest the concept of it. But 2.4 million viewers tuned in for the Friday night clincher, despite the fact that it was a blowout. Just beneath the amount for Game 2, which was Saturday. Panthers-Oilers, Game 2 on Friday, 2.5 million viewers. But the amount of people that watched the clincher was more than the F1 Grand Prix in Miami, which is kind of stabilized, the Masters first round on ESPN, as well as Duke, North Carolina, the matchup in March in the ACC tournament semifinal. Blue bloods of men's college basketball. And I get there's transfers in all these sports, but I'll say that that's a one redeeming quality for women's sports, and it's one of the cool things that you can take. Speaking of TV viewership, by the way,
Number 2.
TNT could not have asked for more than they got with the French Open Finals for women's tennis. Coco Gauff's victory over Aryna Sabalenka, 1.5 million viewers, just a touch under that. And then Yannick Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, just over 1.75 million, 1.76 million, who watched that thriller. Look, these numbers are not as big, even as softball, as we mentioned out, much less NHL, Major League Baseball. But the numbers have gone up. I'll say this. The big three in men's tennis, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, and even the Williams sisters in women's tennis, and how they've elevated. In the sport that became popular largely during the COVID pandemic, now that you've got some viable young stars that can capture attention, I do think that's a valued asset that can elevate tennis. More on that tomorrow in the Fast Lane, because news that indirectly impacts NASCAR in
Number 1.
the PGA Tour is zeroing in on Brian Rolapp, NFL executive, to be their next CEO. That impacts NASCAR in this sense. There was a lot of talk out there that Steve O'Donnell, NASCAR president, Steve Phelps, NASCAR president, was going to take over the role of PGA Tour CEO. So I would say this, it's really good if you're NASCAR that you keep your leadership core in place. I'll also say this, O'Donnell and Phelps have done a lot of good things to balance out some of the dictatorial style leadership, or being in charge, we should call it, of the France family. So this is really good. When you're talking about NASCAR being able to keep some core leadership in place, that is a plus for them. Meanwhile, more on that development with Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network in just a moment, around 5:45. But when we return, we'll get with Preston Will about Virginia baseball coach Chris Pollard, the new coach from Amherst County, being named as the new baseball coach today, or at least the reports leaking out and nobody denying it, so it's going to happen. When we return, this is the Fast Lane on the VTRN Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports.
Car insurance rates are rising rapidly. That's no secret. It's because the cost of medical care for those who are injured and the repair and replacement cost of damaged vehicles is skyrocketing. But what can you do about it? Hi, this is Judd Gardner with Gardner Insurance Solutions in Lynchburg. We've been helping Central Virginia drivers purchase the coverage they need at affordable prices since 1993. Talk with us before you pay again. We represent numerous companies and have many cost-saving strategies. Gardner Insurance Solutions, 434-316-5433.
We're here with Colt from We Fix Stupid Computers. Colt, to go along with your residential or individual walk-in services that you offer, you also do a lot of business IT support. How about you discuss that, and what specifically do you do to help businesses in the area?
We see a lot of that. Small to medium-sized businesses, they still have their IT projects. They still need resources to help them within their office and for remote users. And so we'll step in and fill in the gap where we do a lot of projects for them, help them manage their resources, their budgets, and get their technology under control.
Colt, how can these people reach out to you to assess their IT needs?
Call us. Our number is 434-525-8590. Our website, wefixstupidcomputers.com. We're on Facebook. And our office is here locally, 14690 Forest Road, right next to Scott's Cabinet on 221.
Pull up a seat and join our conversation. Around the Table with Vicki is my new local radio show and podcast discussing leadership, entrepreneurship, philanthropy, faith, and family.
So obviously in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of challenges, that people only typically talk about all the great things, but there's also a lot of challenges that come with entrepreneurship and sacrifice and lessons learned. So what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced throughout business, and how did you overcome them?
Good question. I think this sounds crazy, but when you're young and you're in you get a couple things in a row that work for you, you get this mentality that you can just accomplish whatever you put your mind to it. And there's a lot of truth to that. If you push yourself, and maybe you don't know everything, but you learn, you read, you surround yourself with folks that can help you get to that point. You just keep struggling. You get knocked back sometimes. You don't achieve your goal. Something doesn't happen in the time frame that you want. You just keep going. Mm-hmm. I know there was times where I always had these. I'm a goal-driven person where I make a list every night of what I want to do. And
you do.
And then you get to work and things happen and they don't get done. But
and you come home and say, I didn't get anything done on my list.
So, yeah. but it helps me know what my focus is.
Around the Table with Vicki, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on WIQO.
Join the Lynchburg Hillcats at Bank of the James Stadium this summer for any of your favorite nightly promotions. New this year are Senior Sluggers Tuesdays, where members of the Silver Sluggers Club get in free, and College Pride Night, where those wearing college apparel receive a discounted ticket on Wednesdays. As always, we'll have Thirsty Thursdays and giveaways and fireworks on the weekend, and free admission for Kids Club members on Sunday. Get your tickets today at lynchburg-hillcats.com.
Put some fun into your lunch or dinner. Come to Kodo Japanese for the show with fun hibachi-style Japanese prepared in front of you. Looking for calmer fun? Kodo Japanese serves Lynchburg's most delicious sushi, including the famed Vol crab rolls, plus drinks including specials on mimosas for brunch every Saturday and Sunday from noon to 3. Speaking of fun, everyone gets a free birthday dinner at Kodo, so put the fun into your meal at Kodo Japanese, Wards Road in Lynchburg. You may be going to the pond, maybe the river, maybe the lake, or maybe even the beach, but you don't quite have the bod for it. You can at InsaneRadioDeals.com. That's right, at InsaneRadioDeals.com, 3-month couples memberships good for 2 adults at Crosswhite Athletic Club are $177.77. That's over 50% off the normal value of a 3-month couples memberships, and only available for you when you shop 24/7 at InsaneRadioDeals.com. So yes, this InsaneRadioDeals.com Fast 8 comes your way from the most audaciously loud tennis courts you could ever imagine, the yellow, black, and white of Randolph College. We're here, though, to get your attention to look at how epic Sunday's action was. In tennis, with one of the best Grand Slam finals of all time, Carlos Alcaraz comes back, beats Jannik Sinner in a 5-set thriller where every set was epic and nail-biting. And then NASCAR at Michigan topped it off with a thrilling race. That is why Sunday is epic and worth your attention.
Head to lynchburg-hillcats.com to lock in your tickets for the Lynchburg Hillcats this season. Now here's VTR in Sport.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
Some people in sports media go so far as to being at the point where they will never even utter the phrase, "I was wrong." It's like they have to beep it out. It's like curse words in their vernacular. We're not that way in the Fast Lane, normally speaking. And I am not going to go so far as to say, "We were wrong," or even, "I was wrong." But I will say this much. We have criticized Carla Williams a lot of times here in the Fast Lane. Not very accessible to the media, to the point where, even Hall of Fame columnist David Teal of dailypress.com last week mentioned that, he gets more out of Bubba Cunningham, and he's not based out of North Carolina and doesn't cover that school as accessibly as, in as much as he does Virginia, which is a pretty big indictment. And David is not one for hot takes or indictments. I mean, that's as big as it gets. But I'll throw this out there. And we mentioned this earlier in the Fast Lane. If you're going to criticize Carla Williams, and we have, and there are plenty of areas in which we will continue to do it, I'll at least give her credit, and if there are other people involved, which I'm sure there are, in the hiring process and the thought behind the last 2 coaching hires at Virginia of note. Brian O'Connor's replacement today, as of course the news came down, coming from Amherst County, no less, to get a new baseball coach, and then obviously getting from VCU Ryan Odom as well. That when you look at those 2 decisions, that you have to at least be willing to give a little bit of credit to Carla Williams for the fact that with Chris Pollard this time and Ryan Odom the last time, the guy that was deemed to be perhaps the best fit for the program, the guy that many deemed to be the ideal target, the one that many people thought Virginia would target, the one that Virginia did target, they ended up pulling home. So from that process, I will give a lot of credit from the thought to the execution and bringing it home. There may have been a lot of snags, as many people think there were with Ryan Odom. Who knows with Chris Pollard and how that all transpired and came together. But we at least, I'll give credit where it's due. She got it across the finish line, as clunky as it may have been in some cases. Now, somebody who has been all over this story for thesaber.com. He also has a podcast that drops regularly, including an emergency one, which, to get my usher on for a moment, it dropped within the last hour, and I have not had a chance to listen to that one yet. It'll be part of my workout routine the next couple of days. But Preston Willett with us once again, or with us for the first time here in the Fast Lane. Preston, first of all, welcome into the Fast Lane. Second of all, I'm not sure how much of that diatribe might be the best way to phrase it, of what you heard from me. How much are you on board with the idea that the criticism at times of Carla Williams is warranted, but as clunky as in some cases as it's been, the thought and the execution of getting the last 2 coaching hires right seems to have at least been there?
Yeah, Ed, appreciate you having me on. It's like one of those complicated math problems that you see in Good Will Hunting, and you're like, I don't know how you get to the answer, but she has found the answer the last 2 times, and it's not been the most sexy. It's not been the most, out there. It's been pretty obvious, pretty right in your face hires in both cases. I mean, Ryan Odom was the perfect choice. I mean, there's a reason he was, rumored as soon as Tony Bennett retired in October. And then in this situation, as soon as Brian O'Connor had his bags packed on the plane to go down to Starkville, Mississippi, there's a reason that Chris Pollard's name was the first one out there. And, I know there were some other names that kind of came up through the process, UConn's Jim Penders, Wake Forest Tom Walter, but Chris Pollard was the guy from the get-go, and you got to give credit to Carla Williams for both of these times going out, getting the guy that is the best fit for the program, has ties to the state of Virginia, and just overall is just, someone that can stabilize the success that Brian O'Connor built over 22 years.
I don't pretend to know nearly as much about baseball as I do basketball and certainly football. I have much more of a cursory knowledge of it. Was Chris Pollard the number one guy all along because he's an Amherst County guy and he's from Virginia? Was he kind of 1A right there with Walters at Wake Forest? And, did the situation at Tennessee with the slur that was uttered down there, did that maybe push the tide away from Walters of Wake Forest and towards Pollard of Duke?
Yeah, I think Walters was a popular option out there. He's done some good work at Wake Forest, but I think everything that I've heard from people I've talked to around UVA and some people that I've talked to and just in the industry as a whole, like Chris Pollard's the name. Like that's been the guy that's been there kind of from the get-go. And because he's got those ties to the state, he has a tremendous amount of success in the state of Virginia. But also, Duke is an interesting program in the ACC. He has done some incredible work there. I mean, I looked it up earlier. Duke had one winning record in ACC play from 1964 to 2013 when he was hired. One winning record in the ACC. And so him coming there and transforming that program, Duke has not been a baseball school. And so there was an opportunity there where like Virginia has been one of the schools that has put the most resources in the ACC towards baseball. And so he was probably a pretty clear and obvious, target for them. They're like, I think we can convince him. It's coming back home to Central Virginia, and he's the right guy. He's got the ACC experience. He's got NCAA postseason experience. It just kind of ticked every single box.
Yeah, I mean, that's the positive. There's a lot of things that you can look at as well. Is a lot of that higher in the appeal of Chris Pollard also the fact that, let's be real. Brian O'Connor's bringing a lot of his support staff. A number of former Virginia baseball players, we'll call them that because they've entered the transfer portal, have done so with the do not contact tag, which basically means you're presuming they're going to follow O'Connor to Mississippi State. That you need a coach that has found a way to win in the ACC, but also has experience kind of building from the studs.
Yeah, and there's a lot of similarities between what Brian O'Connor did starting back in 2004 with Virginia and what Chris Pollard has done with Duke going back to 2013. I mean, down to the point that they both made their first super regional in their sixth season as a head coach. So there's a lot of similarities to what they had to do to kind of build up these programs. Guess what Chris Pollard doesn't have to do when he gets to Virginia, though? He doesn't have to build up the infrastructure around the program. He does have to build a roster, absolutely, because there's 20-plus players from UVA in the portal. I think they also stand a chance that maybe not all those guys follow Brian O'Connor to Mississippi State. So maybe he has a good chance of convincing some of them to stay because of his track record and the fact that, Chris Pollard has recruited the state of Virginia really well. I mean, you look on this roster right now, there's a couple guys that were competing for them in that super regional in key roles that are from the state of Virginia. So he's got some pull. He also recruits the Northeast a lot, which Virginia has traditionally recruited, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, that area up there. So there's a lot of just kind of overlap there. And I think also, unlike Ryan Odom when he came, because a lot of his VCU players were upperclassmen graduating out of eligibility, Chris Pollard has a lot of players on this Duke roster that are underclassmen, have eligibility, some from Virginia, that I think would be very interested in, they hold him in such high esteem that they might follow him to Virginia, and that helps you kind of build a roster on the fly when you have to replace so much talent.
Yeah, I mean, that's the positive for Virginia, ironically, as much as they're losing from their roster and many of those players who are going to follow Brian O'Connor to Mississippi State. When you hire a coach from a good program like Duke coming off a good year, then you can bring them in as well. The other part to this is, this is a coach who's got 4 trips to the super regionals. I'll grade 3 of them as ones where you would have loved to have seen them go to the College World Series. This year, I mean, again, I call me cynical, Preston, but I don't think that, Coach Pollard was so distraught over the loss to Murray State last night that all of a sudden in like 15 hours, he found a way to, consult with Virginia, then go back to Duke and then decide on Virginia. I'm sure this was in the works before. Therefore, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you can kind of ding Duke for not getting by Murray State in 800-1 odds. That's correct, 800-1 at the beginning of the tournament to win the College World Series, and still a long shot. But you can still sit there and look at the overall body of work and say, in spite of that, this is still a really good program that has reason to give Virginia fans optimism.
Yeah, this is the thing that's going to be the monkey on his back coming to Virginia now. You've had 4 trips to the Super Regional. Each time you've won a game, So you went to that final third game, tied up 1-1, just one game away from getting to Omaha to get to the College World Series, something that no one in Duke history has done since 1961. It was a very different tournament back then. But now you're coming to Virginia, where that's the expectation. You know, Virginia's made 7 College World Series under Brian O'Connor, including 3 in the last 5 seasons now. So how do you kind of get past that? And that's going to be the big question on his back when he gets to Virginia until it happens. I mean, it's kind of like with Tony Bennett when it took him, you know, however long to get to that first Final Four and you finally got that monkey off the back. It's going to be something like that for Chris Pollard at Virginia because expectations are high at Virginia just because of what Brian O'Connor built. And I think fans, when they see a hire like this, they're not expecting to take too big of a step back, maybe a little bit in the interim as you're rebuilding this roster. But in the long term, I think they expect to be at the top of the ACC. And I think a lot of people expect them to be at the top of the ACC because this is a program with top 15 resources in the country. Basically, they're one of the best outside of the SEC in terms of commitment and resources to baseball. And that's going to be the question, though, for Pollard. Can he get over the hump and get into Omaha?
Preston Willett of the Saber.com and also the Who's On podcast talking UVA baseball with us here in the Fast Lane. You know, we mentioned the praise of Carla Williams for, you know, as clunky as it might have been, the Good Will Hunting math equation reference that you used is a pretty apt one for this situation as well. Does this spur her on to maybe be more proactive in helping not only Chris Pollard, but other coaches so that you're not repeating this situation where sitting head coaches feel some level of, I have to beg for support as opposed to they're being proactive for support?
Yeah, I think to an extent, because I think at the end of the day, I mean, we saw the contract that Brian O'Connor got that makes him the second highest paid coach in college baseball. Virginia was never going to get to $2.9 million. That's just not the resources they have. I mean, the SEC, you know, as much as people want to point out that, you know, they only got 2 teams out of their 13 that got into the NCAA tournament to the College World Series, and that's a little disappointing for them. There's still a gap in the resources, and I don't know if that's necessarily always going to play out on the field, but it's definitely going to play out when you're trying to bring coaches in. It's, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be easier to get into the NCAA tournament in the SEC just because of the amount of teams in there that are competing at a high level. So I don't know if there's much they could have done in that situation with Brian O'Connor. I think at the end of the day, it's, you know, $2.9 million. It's the, you know, NIL money that they have. But Virginia's done a really good job in football that we've seen, in men's basketball and women's basketball. And we'll see how they do in baseball now with Chris Pollard coming in. I'm sure he wanted some kind of assurances about, all right, what kind of, you know, resources are you going to give me to go out and build a roster now? We'll see, but, you know, they've done a good job in those major sports to give them enough fuel to go out and build pretty good rosters. I mean, you've seen what football's done this year, you know, pretty much consensus top 25 transfer portal class, and basketball is getting some high marks. In talking to people nationally, there's some people that are very excited about this Virginia basketball team, and women's basketball's even made some big moves this offseason. So they're putting resources in, but at the end of the day, like, you know, there's only so much that you can have go around.
That's the big thing, is there's only so much money to go around, even if the bagman might be making a comeback in certain locations if these rules get more strictly enforced. Preston, thank you for jumping on short notice to go over the news of Amherst County native Chris Pollard taking this opportunity to be the head baseball coach at UVA to replace Brian O'Connor. Really appreciate your time and would love to catch up again soon.
Yeah, anytime, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Indeed. Preston Willett with us here in the Fast Lane, and great insight overall on the search. He's been on the pulse for that one for quite a while. When we return in the Fast Lane, can NASCAR exhale a little bit? We know the France family's in charge, but one of their leaders and executives will not be the new head executive of the PGA Tour. Somebody who actually is tied into both of those. He does some work covering the PGA Tour, and he's obviously familiar with NASCAR as the lead broadcaster for the Motor Racing Network. Alex Hayden slated to stop by next here in the Fast Lane on the VTR and Sports app and ask that smart speaker, open VTR and Sports.
Mark Dalton here with Terry Subaru. Love to drive? Then you'll love the all-new 2025 Subaru Wilderness family. These cars are built for adventure with symmetrical all-wheel drive, rugged capability, and legendary Subaru reliability. These stylish vehicles are ready for anything. Plus, every new Subaru we sell comes with an exclusive Terry Promise, a lifetime powertrain warranty. Visit us on Forest Road in Lynchburg or browse our inventory online 24/7 at terrysubaru.com. Terry Subaru. You'll love our cars.
Big Boys Guns can thankfully say we serve Central and Southwest Virginia as we've done for over a decade. We've learned some people know exactly what they want, while some prefer a helping hand. That's why our staff won't judge your knowledge. We're just excited to greet you and help you in finding that perfect firearm or accessory, because everyone is at a different stage of responsible gun ownership. Our advice is free, and we even have concealed carry classes. When you're ready for responsible gun ownership, come see us. Big Boys Guns on Route 460 in Blue Ridge.
Rain takes a toll on your house, including your chimney. Even when it's not raining, prolonged humidity impacts your chimney. Don't wait for the problem to enter your house. Call Black Goose Chimney Service. Featuring decades worth of experience, Black Goose Chimney Service will assess what your chimney needs and give you honest answers. Because the longer you wait, the worse it gets. Get ahead of the problem. Call Black Goose Chimney Service and visit blackgoose.net.
Car insurance rates are rising rapidly. That's no secret. It's because the cost of medical care for those who are injured and the repair and replacement cost of damaged vehicles is skyrocketing. But what can you do about it? Hi, this is Judd Gardner with Gardner Insurance Solutions in Lynchburg. We've been helping Central Virginia drivers purchase the coverage they need at affordable prices since 1993. Talk with us before you pay again. We represent numerous companies and have many cost-saving strategies. Gardner Insurance Solutions, 434-316-5433.
Have you looked at your home's exterior lately? Do you see faded siding, paint peeling, and wood rotting, windows that are impossible to open and close, and gutters falling off? Call Collins Siding and Windows to transform your home's exterior and save you money on energy costs. Dreaming of a new porch or sunroom? Collins can do that too. Since 1989, Collins Siding and Windows has been transforming homes in Central Virginia. Roofs, windows, siding, gutters, porches, decks, and sunrooms. They can do it all. Call Collins Siding and Windows today, 434-525-6307.
Hi, I'm Matt with Fleet Feet Roanoke. I've enjoyed working with Ed Lane and the Virginia Talk Radio Network. But when they sold their Roanoke station, I was skeptical the partnership could still provide value. Months later, I'm thankful that Ed took the time to meet with me, discuss the right solutions, and a plan to invite his audience to Fleet Feet Roanoke. Now we're able to build a connection with that audience thanks to Ed's creativity. Stop by and see us at Fleet Feet Roanoke to learn more. We'd love to get to know you.
Email info@virginiatalkradionetwork.com to start growing your business. The Black Crows, Mount Joy, Government Mule, JJ Gray and Mofro. Need us to continue? Paul Cawthon, the California Honey Drops, Future Birds. And that's just a handful of acts performing at Floyd Fest 25 Aurora, July 23rd through 27th at Festival Park in Floyd. 7-time winner of the Best Music Festival, Floyd Fest features 100 artists on 7 stages over 5 days with outdoor adventure, camping, and family fun. Grab your tickets now at floydfest.com. Don't miss out on the music, magic, and mountains. Visit floydfest.com to secure tickets to Floyd Fest 25 Aurora today.
Hey there, fellow travelers. It's me, the Hotel Whiz. Before you go anywhere, call me day or night for hotel rates too low to publish. I'll save you up to 75% on over 500,000 hotels across the globe. You see, I've already done the research, so you don't have to spend time online trying to find the best deal. That's up to 75% off. Just call me, the Hotel Whiz. It's a free call, and you get instant access to rates too low to publish with no cancellation fees.
Make a free call now and save up to 75% off your hotel rooms the next time you're going somewhere for business or pleasure. Call the Hotel Whiz now and get instant access to rates too low to publish. 800-378-2714. 800-378-2714. 800-378-2714. Call the Hotel Whiz right now for rates too low to publish. 800-378-2714.
NFL and Commanders insider Lake Lewis joined us Tuesday on the morning warm-up to look ahead to mandatory minicamp and the biggest headlines for the Commanders, including the contract situation for Terry McLaurin and what he wanted to see from veteran acquisitions Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunstall, and Marshawn Lattimore. Wednesday, Bryson Gordon joins us to talk about Liberty and how it is impacted by the House settlement and much more. Join us on the morning warm-up, weekday morning, 7 to 8 a.m. on VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, 1320 a.m., and on the VTRN Sports app.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
So we've called Motor Racing Network lead pit reporter Steve Post, the mayor of Martinsville, previously in the fast lane, because he is such an advocate for that track. And Steve not able to join us today. We'll try to catch up with him in a couple of weeks. But somebody who apparently was with the postman himself at Berlin Raceway a couple of days ago prior to the Cup race over the weekend at Michigan, Alex Hayton, lead announcer for the Motor Racing Network, joining us in the fast lane. Alex, great to be speaking with you. On top of that, though, we'll get your take on the news that developed locally today. NASCAR and Flow Sports announcing they're kicking in an extra $50,000 to the Virginia Triple Crown. It culminates at Martinsville Speedway. Before that, at South Boston in our backyard in Langley Speedway. So 2 of the 3 tracks are within our Virginia Talk Radio Network audience footprint from the radio side of things. How big is this for NASCAR to be feeding back into some of the local racing circuits like this?
It's monumental. And first of all, thanks for having me on the show with you. But it's huge because this is another step for NASCAR to not only solidify what they've been saying, but to actually put their money where their mouth is and actually say, we still believe in short track racing at the grassroots level. To be able to step up and do this with this much money being added to it simply proves that point. And I think it's a big win for obviously the Virginia Triple Crown, Martinsville Speedway, South Boston, Larry King Law's Langley Speedway. It's a big deal. It really is, because if we don't have these short tracks, and those are obviously Martinsville's a premier national track, but South Boston Speedway and Langley Speedway are premier short tracks in the country. You mentioned that we were at Berlin Raceway in Martin, Michigan this past weekend. The idea is you mentioned my colleague Steve Post, one of my best friends. We go to short track races. No matter where we're racing around the country with NASCAR's Cup Series, we're going to find ourselves a short track if possible, and we're going to go support short track racing. So yeah, it's big for NASCAR to put their money where their mouth is.
Well, it does, and it also gives a lot of fans, particularly in this region, that extra level of connection. How much does that feed into the fact that, we've seen NASCAR races in certain venues really struggle, and unfortunately in our backyard, Richmond is one of those examples, but Martinsville has embraced the grassroots style of racing. Do you notice that being kind of a carryover into the hype, to the fact that, and Clay Campbell's done a remarkable job, and full disclosure, I know Clay Campbell, so there's a personal relationship with Clay and the staff, but the ability for them to tap into the grassroots racing, to therefore use that as a feeder product to the fans of NASCAR to come to their Cup races in race weekends.
Yeah, I think it's a win for everybody. Clay's one of the, number one, the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. But number two, he understands how to promote a racetrack. And what I mean by that is, yes, he has 2 NASCAR Cup Series dates per season, but he wants people to come to those races. He also wants those NASCAR Cup Series fans who may have never been to a late model race to come to the biggest late model race on the planet there in the Valley Star Credit Union 300 at Martinsville Speedway. It's a cross promotion, and I think it's a win-win. Clay gets it, and he understands the type of racetrack that Martinsville Speedway is conducive to host multiple types of race cars. So to be able to do that, I think is huge. Clay gets it. And I think that's one of the biggest things about Clay Campbell is he understands, because he's a race fan himself. And what would he want? What would the people right there in the immediate area, let alone the greater Commonwealth of Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, the whole area, the whole region, what would they want to see? Heck, if you recall, they brought the Mazda MX-5 series there and raced last year. So essentially, if it's got wheels, Clay's willing to race it at Martinsville Speedway.
The Alex Hayton, Twitter and Instagram. Of course, you hear him on the Motor Racing Network. You did this past weekend, as I did. I was hanging out with the kids, again, to get my usher on for a moment. A confessional. I was watching tennis because I know I can count on you guys on the Motor Racing Network to bring such good broadcasts, and my kids want to be outside. I just fire up the app and keep listening to you guys. So
I appreciate that.
You are a part of our Sunday, and you'll probably be again this coming Sunday when you head to Mexico City. But we're on the business side of motorsports right now, and you're tied into the PGA as well. You do work with announcing with the PGA Tour. NASCAR and the PGA are kind of meeting today to an extent, with the reports out there that the PGA Tour's CEO search, just according to Sports Business Journal, it's not official, but they're pretty well plugged into the business side of things. So take that for what it's worth. That they're zeroing in on Brian Rolapp of the NFL, which means that Steve Phelps of NASCAR is unlikely to be taken away from being NASCAR commissioner. from the NASCAR side of things, how big is this for NASCAR that Phelps had a really good opportunity and maybe would have liked to have taken it, but for NASCAR, you retain one of the bigger leadership minds in the sport?
I think it's a win for NASCAR, and I think it solidifies across the professional sports world just how relevant NASCAR racing is compared to all the other stick and ball sports out there, because he could easily have jumped ship and gone to the PGA Tour if he wanted to do that, and no one would have blamed him. Let's face it, nobody would have blamed him if he wanted to go do that. But he understands where the sport of NASCAR racing is right now as a whole, where it's headed, and his vision and his leadership over the last few years and where he wants it to go, I think speaks volumes. And I think NASCAR racing as a whole is in a really good spot. Now, I get it. NASCAR fans can be finicky. They can be a little stubborn, may not like a whole lot of change out there, and they may not like some of the things that are going on in the sport of NASCAR racing. But the fact of the matter is under Steve Phelps's leadership, we're not afraid to try new things. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We go on to something else or revert back to what we had been doing. But a lot of the stuff that Steve Phelps and his leadership team have implemented have been successful, let alone the media rights contracts with all the different ways to consume NASCAR racing, whether it's TV, streaming like it's going on right now with Amazon Prime. The numbers are through the rooftop. So I think with Steve Phelps leading and wanting to stay with NASCAR is a huge win for our sport.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up the business side of things with NASCAR and the streaming element, as well as Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network is with us here in the Fast Lane. They may have lost overall viewership, but they're picking up a lot in terms of younger viewership. And correct me if I'm wrong, but older viewers will probably find a way to follow it. Of course, if they don't, they can always check out the MRN app and they can listen to you that way like I do in the Fast Lane. But you mentioned that part of it for NASCAR. They've gotten creative with that. They've gotten creative with the shows, the Netflix series as well, with the insight into the sport. How much of this is the fact that, you mentioned fans not wanting change. Sometimes they don't want change. Sometimes they want change, but a different kind of change. But Steve Phelps has at least listened to that while balancing out ways to tap into new fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to understand, in more cases than not, the old adage is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And meaning a lot of the fans that are making the most noise are the ones that are most unhappy. People who are happy don't normally complain. That's just fact. In any walk of life. So you have to take all the feedback that you get as a sport and as an industry, process it. Is it good feedback? Is it somebody that's just blowing off steam? Is it somebody, heck, that's just mad because they didn't go to a race and, well, they may have lost a race and now they're just mad about that. You just got to process all of that. The fact of the matter is there is a big demand for NASCAR racing. Obviously, with racing outside the United States this weekend with the Cup Series. First points race for the Cup Series outside of the United States since 1958. I believe it was July 18th of 58 when the Cup Series last ran a points race, and that was just across the border in Toronto, Canada. Lee Petty won that race. Ironically, his son Richard, the King, that was his first ever NASCAR Cup Series start, was outside the United States. A lot of people don't know that. So there is a demand to do this. And if you listen to the rumor mills much, wink, wink, we may be racing in downtown San Diego, California in the near future on a street circuit, similar like what we did in Chicago. So there's a lot of demand. The Pacific Northwest wants a NASCAR series race. Heck, the country of Brazil wants NASCAR racing down there. We have the NASCAR Brazil series now, but they want the NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinity Series. They want them there. The United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, they want NASCAR racing over there. So there's a big demand. But under Steve Phelps, you brought him up a moment ago, the commissioner of NASCAR, under his leadership, it's important to expand, but not all at once. So if you're a NASCAR fan, don't fret. We're not going to go out of the country 10 times out of the year. That's not going to happen. Maybe once on a stretch, maybe twice in a season is what I understand. Maybe down the road at some point, but you have to be willing to change, and not just in NASCAR racing, but in all walks of life. And I understand the legacy fan. First thing they're going to pound their fist on the desk and say the N in NASCAR stands for national. But I also say the N in NFL stands for national. And the NFL has played games in Mexico City. Every year they play multiple games in Europe, whether it's Germany, England, whatever the case may be. Ireland they've played. So the fact of the matter is, the United States of America has tremendous professional athletics, and the world wants to see it. So every sport's trying to figure out ways to try to do that in some form or fashion. Major League Baseball has played games in Mexico City. So there is a market out there, and people don't realize Mexico City, Mexico is one of the, 5 largest cities on the planet. It is huge as far as population goes, and there's a demand there for American sports.
And Alex, we'll wrap it up on this and kind of coming full circle. If NASCAR was that uncommitted, I'm going to create a word here, invent one. If they were that uncommitted domestically, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. Like as we started the show discussing, investing in the Virginia Triple Crown Series and grassroots racing.
Absolutely right. They're totally committed to continuing to bring the best racing they can to everywhere in the United States that they possibly can. The fans are supporting it. We had a hell of a crowd at Michigan over the weekend. It was, from what I understand, like 1,200 people shy of a sellout. The infield was completely sold out. Pocono Raceway next week after Mexico City, infield's already sold out. And there's less than 1,000 seats remaining in the grandstand. So there is momentum on NASCAR's side. And again, whether it's Fox TV numbers from the first part of the season to now the Amazon Prime streaming numbers, they are absolutely skyrocketing. So Americans still want NASCAR racing.
And it's good quality product in a lot of cases. And when it's not, they've at least shown a willingness to try different things. It's not perfect, but they're at least trying things to make it better. And I'll give them that for sure.
Absolutely.
Alex Hayden with us here to wrap up the Fast Lane. Alex, thank you so much. We'll keep it locked to the Alex Hayden on Twitter and Instagram. And most importantly, be listening for you guys this weekend and next as you're at Mexico City and Pocono.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me on with you.
It's always our pleasure. Alex Hayden with us here in the Fast Lane, sending blessings and safe travels to Alex and the Motor Racing Network crew. Thank you for joining us today in the Fast Lane as well. We always appreciate that. We're back tomorrow afternoon, 5 to 6 p.m. right here on the VTRN Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports. Thanks for listening to the Fast Lane on VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, W227 BG Timberlake.